1 block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks.
WNYC-TV presents About the Arts with Barbara Lee Diamonstein.
I will. Hi, I'm Barbara Lee Diamonstein, and welcome to About the Arts. I'm very pleased to welcome our guest today, who is a rare, if not unique, combination of excellences. He is a painter, a sculptor, and an editor. In fact, the editorial director of all of Condé Nast magazines. I'm especially pleased to welcome today Alexander Lieberman, not in his role as contemporary tastemaker, but as a highly accomplished artist. How do you manage to divide your time and efforts, Alex?
Well, I've never divided anything. I think it's all part of one life. And, you know, one thinks about art or magazines in waking moments and in the night, and there's no division. It's one life.
Do you have to apportion some time in the studio?
Yes,
and some time?
What people don't realize is that the actual execution of work today takes very little time. It's the thinking about it that takes a long time. So sometimes the big advantage is that I have a studio in the country, and sometimes a sculpture can stand for 2 years or 3 years. I may knock it down, add to it, think about it, and this is how the work proceeds.
So that you are always, in a sense, conceptualizing. Do you ever conceptualize for the magazine while you're in your studio in the country?
No. I think that's a real cut-off. I mean, when I leave the office on Friday, I never think for one moment of anything to do with the publications.
As many artists, you have more than one job, in a sense. Do you regard your work as an editor being a way of making a living while you pursue your real life as an artist?
That's the real basis of it. And I had to earn a living since I'm 18, and I continue to need to earn a living.
It's practical facts of life.
Yes, and especially the sculpture I'm interested in, monumental sculpture, demands tremendous expenditures of money. And I prefer to be, as long as I can, dependent on myself. It's difficult, but it's very satisfying in many ways.
We're looking at one of those monumental pieces of sculpture that was highly acclaimed when it was part of the Monumenta at Newport, Rhode Island. Can you tell us something about the work behind us? It is heroic in scale. What is its height? What is its color? Where is it now? Well,
it's about 23 feet high and about 30 or 35 feet in width. And it's white, painted steel, bolted together. And this was photographed in Newport at the time of the Monumenta show. And now it belongs to the Art Institute in Milwaukee. It's in front of the new building in Milwaukee. And this was one of the attempts of getting human beings involved with space. I mean, I hope in most of my recent work that there's a participation from whoever walks by. They can touch it, walk through it, look up inside it. And to me, I'm more and more interested in sculpture that is not just an object, but an element that you can truly make part of your life.
Are you trying to make it less precious and more functional?
No, certainly not functional unless you consider
the
emotional
human spirit,
function.
I certainly do.
Which I think is what I would hope. But I think one learns a tremendous amount from temples, from religious buildings, or from monuments of the past, where you really experience a physical transformation. I mean, when you enter St. Peter's through a door, and then you have this extraordinary, in Rome, and you have this extraordinary explosion of space that hits you, is something that no object in itself can accomplish. And I believe that there's something very interesting that it happens to our emotions when we physically have to look up or bend our heads backwards. And I think human monuments could force the spectator into some kind of, through physical experience, into a spiritual experience.
Well, what springs to mind, both in terms of that scale and the cylindrical columns and your reference to the temple, is the Greek influence. Is that one of the things that's informed your sensibility?
Well, yes. I think originally, I mean, the myth has always moved me. And I think I was always interested in the origins of any visual experience. I wanted to sort of go to primary sources and see if they could be translated into a modern media. I feel modern man is too divorced from this kind of experience, and I think if abstract sculpture has any meaning, it has to connect with a mystical experience. That is the meaning of abstraction. Otherwise it becomes a decorative object and meaningless as far as I'm concerned.
For more than 25 years, you seem to have deep involvement with certain forms. The circle and the cylinder appear and reappear as recurring themes. In fact, we have some photographs of some of your work. Perhaps we can show some of them on screen while you can describe your sustaining preoccupation with those forms. How did that begin?
Well, it began with, in the end of the 40s, with the preoccupation with the circle. And of course, a cylinder is a circle, a cut of a circle, looked at from one end.
Where is the piece that's on screen now?
This is the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia.
That is one of your largest...
Yes, it's 50 feet high, and it straddles the main street of the university.
So that it serves as an arch as well?
It's an arch, and it's a sort of link. There are 4 roads that cross there, and there are 4 different buildings, dormitories. And the idea was to sort of create a focus. And I'm very happy because I understand it's become the meeting place.
What is the piece called?
Covenant, which is again a sort of sense of union. And this is a piece in Chicago called Ode, which is 25 feet high, which is again a elliptical sections of cylinders.
What materials do you use here?
Always steel. All these sculptures are made of steel, rolled steel, and painted. This one is red, and the Covenant piece was red too. This is a cantilevered piece, which was quite interesting to attempt. This is a piece in my studio, 2 pieces. One is called The Way. It's one of the biggest, it's 100 feet wide and about 40 feet high. And behind there's a sort of beginning, an unfinished mysterious temple that I'm attempting called Zig, probably for ziggurat, but it's not finished. And
how can you, to be very direct, how can any artist afford to do a work of such scale when the cost of fabricating the millwork for something like this is so enormous without a commission?
The whole point of this is that all these sculptures are made of discard materials. They're all gas tanks that have been discarded, and before the gas shortage we were even practically paid everyone asked them to have us to remove them, but now we have to pay about $100 a 24-foot gas tank.
These are cut off?
No, these are abandoned from gas stations, from factories, and this is what they throw away because there's a leak in them or a hole or whatever it is.
And then how do you use them?
Well, you cut them with a torch in cylindrical ways. This is a finished piece in the University of Honolulu in Hawaii, and that's about 30 feet high. And having worked with the circle for many years, I was at, this is in St. Paul, Minnesota, in front of the Osborne building. And the whole point was how to be able to express the system I've been interested in, which is cylinders and circles, when one day I had this thought that basically there was this discard material that was cheap, available, and one could really consider a tank like a column. A gas tank is a column.
When did you turn to industrial materials, and do you use any others?
No, yes, I've used bronze. I use a lot of bronze. But basically, I think the industrial material are the most available medium to a sculptor, and I think it's one of the miracles of America today. You know, sculptors like de Suvero or who are, you know, Marble, they use I-beams a great deal. And
well, you've used the I-beam and tubes yourself.
Yes,
too.
Yes, but I mean, I think he's used it more grandly, and I also think artists like Serra, who use straight plates that come from, you know, industrial fabricators. And modern sculpture in America is made possible by this extraordinary industrial availability.
To the work of what other artists do you respond? You mentioned de Souvreau.
And Serra,
admiringly. But who were your artistic mentors? I suspect they come from more classical origins, no matter what their contemporary guise.
I think they go through the centuries. I mean, they're eternal inspirations. And I think, for me, modern art should be linked with the sort of the eternal values that all great art should be involved in.
Well, who has informed your sensibility during the course of your own evolution?
Oh my God, I mean, so many. I mean, you have to go to Italian masters, you have to go to Giotto, of course there's Michelangelo, you can't escape him. From Michelangelo to Barnett Newman, I mean, you can, I mean, there's a whole fantastic range of marvelous geniuses that I think stimulate any artist who's interested in creating.
There are not many places, however, where one can show work of such scale. Along about, oh, I guess 10 years ago, not far from New York City, 50 miles north of it, in a small town called Mountainville, New York, an art center was established called Storm King. Can you tell us something about Storm King and how it focuses on the exhibition of sculpture?
Well, Storm King is an extraordinary, privately owned institution that specialized in monumental sculpture. And they have about 100 acres of marvelous landscaped land. And for the last, as you say, 10 years, they have been purchasing. And lately they've been allowing other sculptors just to place their monumental works, because as you say, there's very little place where great works can go. And they're not afraid, for instance, they have already 3 giant sculptures of mine, and one of the first giant tank sculptures, which is enormous. I mean, they moved it purchased it 4 or 5 years ago. The others they moved from Washington, and for this exhibition that is going to happen, they also moved 3 gigantic sculptures. And it's like building and moving whole steel houses. Gigantic trailer loads have to be organized, cranes have to be organized, foundations built and poured. And, you know, this whole sculpture that we are involved in, I say we because there are other sculptors involved, but perhaps not quite in my scale or in this kind of, a new word should be found for it or coined. I haven't found it because it's sort of beyond sculpture. It's a combination of architecture. I think it's like free architecture, an architecture without a functional purpose. And I mean, some of it, because these are literally buildings of the spirit, at least I hope they are.
You see them as more than sculpture, less than architecture, but some kind of spiritual aesthetic environment?
Yes, yes. The word environment disturbs me a little bit because it's a bit too theatrical, but I still believe that it ought to be the object, I have to use the word object, the thing in itself has to have create a visual response. This is the important factor always. But beyond that is this the physical involvement in the work of art, in the work, I shouldn't even say art, yes. That is important.
The show that you modestly, passingly refer to is your own. It opens on May 18th and it lasts all summer long at Storm King. In the evolution of your own work, how would you describe this show? How many pieces are in it and what is its theme?
Well, I suppose the theme is to show the range of one man trying to do different things.
But it is restricted to your sculpture?
No.
Oh?
It will have about 100 paintings. It has, I'd say, about 50 drawings. It has about 50 photographs. It has a full range and also about 30 lithographs of aquatints. So it's going to be a very full,
enormous, yeah.
It's like a small or large retrospective. And they plan, as a matter of fact, to change the installation of the paintings in the middle of the summer. The sculptures, they cannot change, they're too big. But there'll be a range of steel
because there are that many pieces, paintings and graphic work,
yes,
so that there will be two shows.
Two shows.
So that one can go more than one time all summer long.
Just refresh the boredom. And to bring the full range, I mean, I think through the 25 years, I think I've experimented with a number of mediums. I mean, sculptures go from plaster, the early plaster, to enamels, to bronze, to steel. And I think it's going to be very, retrospectives are always very important for an artist because one is always a bit terrified of them because one sees oneself. And, well, we'll see.
You mentioned 25 years. That's about the amount of time that we know in the broadest sense much of your work. But for an even longer period of time you have been working away. You even studied architecture as a young man.
That's right.
And photography too. In fact,
I never studied photography, but I mean, I've always photographed since I'm a child. I mean, my father gave me a vest pocket camera when I was 8 years old. So I've always taken photographs. I always considered myself a painter. When I was 3 years old, my mother insisted that I squeeze out paints. She dragged me through all the museums of Italy all my life.
Was she a painter?
No, she was an actress, and she had a theater in Russia. So I was always exposed to art, and I never really thought I could be anything else.
Well, one of the interesting documents in a recent project that I have completed was necessary to find photographs of artists, and it was quite surprising to me to see how few exist and at various times in their careers. One of the most extraordinary reservoir of that material are a series of photographs that you, an artist, took of other artists. How did that come about? When did you start photographing them? And in fact, they culminated in a show, I believe, in 1958 at the Museum of Modern Art.
Yes, and then
how did that all happen?
The book was called Artist in His Studio. And it happened because I was so terrified of the destructions during the war and the destructions of estates when artists die. And I felt, as an art student, I was terribly interested in technique. And I never could find answers to my questions about technique. And what I always had was theories, how Cézanne painted, his theories, whatever. So I thought maybe only an artist could really seek out and document for other artists. It was not a photographic mission, it was a documentary mission. I mean, what were the brushes? What was the space? What were the windows? Well, I mean, how was the technical environment of the artist? And what was the trace of the artist on Earth before it gets all plundered and destroyed? And I feel this happens all the time. I mean, to give you an example, I was able to catch Cézanne's studio just as it was. There was still his coat hanging and everything. Then it became an official museum, so the French government repainted everything. So now it's a marvelous brand new studio, supposedly Cézanne's studio. But to catch that trace, and I was thinking, well, Calder's just died, unfortunately. I hope his studio, I was discussing that with a friend, could be maintained. Why couldn't it be maintained like Brancusi's studio in Paris? No, I'm sure, I hope something can be done.
Are you still taking photographs of artists?
Yes, from time to time.
Who most recently?
Well, as a matter of fact, I was talking to Helen Frankenthaler today, maybe. I mean, artists are friends.
Who takes your photograph?
Well, you're doing it. No.
I like the idea.
I have friends who have taken pictures. Marvelous picture was taken by Renata Ponsold. Bob Motherwell's wife was, in my opinion, a very sensitive photographer of artists.
In going to the studios of artists and documenting their studios and their work, what was your most striking insight?
I have an idea.
Well,
are artists different from the rest of us?
I think it's sort of a monastic dedication, an obsession. And I was struck by this sort of singleness of mind, and but also I was struck, I must say, in general, by a certain sadness in all the lives that I have seen, except maybe Matisse, maybe. I think he's the one glorious exception. But in general, even Picasso there was a, you know, creation is a rather tragic, serious creation. Is not a gay process. And I don't know, people think, you know, pretty colors go on a painting, and it's not true. And very few artists have what I would say happy or gay lives. And I think one of the things that happened, they escaped very often. They went to cafes, they went to dance, they escaped the studio, they escaped solitude. Studios are terrible cells of solitude.
How do you compare that to the life of a writer? Also a rather lonely and grinding business.
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know enough about writers, frankly, but and I think the interesting thing in general, I think the environment of the artist has never been a very interesting one. There were no beautiful interiors, maybe Braque, maybe Matisse a little bit, but nothing counted except the work.
These pieces all have titles, and evocative ones at that. Which comes first? The work? Is it part of the process? Does it come before? Does it become after?
Always
when do you entitle a work?
Always the work first. A certain longing that one tries to express by doing the work. And then comes a very difficult moment when one has to title. I wish one didn't have to title.
Well, you have a number of works that are called untitled.
I know, because I just cannot title them. The titles, in my case, always come after, always.
How do you know when a work is finished?
Well, I think when I feel, after quite a long time, that I can't do anything more to it. I mean, my longing to change it or to fulfill what I was hoping to do stops. Then I go on to something else. But I have a tendency, I think, to destroy too much. I can't tell you the number of sculptures that have been just torn down. Maybe they were much better than the final result, but I mean, I just have to tear them down, and out of them come other sculptures, maybe better, maybe not, but they have to be. There's a certain necessity to all this, which is probably what art is about.
Do you work on more than one piece at a time?
Yes, always, always.
What are you working on now?
Well, I'm working on a monumental project for Rockford, Illinois. It's a city sculpture because they want to dramatize sort of the downtown area that they feel needs a whole restructuring. And it's a very interesting challenge. It's a major piece which will be about 50 feet high and will become the central focus of this new redevelopment.
And when is that scheduled to be installed?
I think in June. I'm flying to Rockford this Friday. But the work is started.
That sounds very exciting. How does an artist get a commission?
Well, I think one is selected in some instances. There are many ways. I mean, one way somebody comes and says, I want a sculpture of yours, or I've seen work of yours that I'm interested in. Or in this case, I think there was a committee of many works were submitted, and out of the group I was fortunate to get the commission. And I think it goes through the National Endowment, that they have to agree because it's partly subsidized. So I think there are many hurdles that have to be, and I think in the Rockford case, I mean, there's even public subscription, which is very exciting. It shows that the whole town is participating. And it touched me very much, because Rockford has 2 or 3 newspapers. The project was front page news, abstract sculpture. This sculpture was on the cover of, then a new magazine issue came out, another of my abstract sculptures was on the cover with a 5-page interview. So somehow it shows that the community is deeply interested in art. They are, and they're finding through, which is very gratifying, through abstract art, a certain fulfillment.
In the 36 years that you've been in this country, how would you describe the changes in popular taste in the response to art in general?
Well, I think it's been an extraordinary, overwhelming development. I still think that art at a certain level is too extreme for the general public, I think, but they're willing to give it a chance. And I think a test that always interests me I've been lucky, but so far I don't think any of my works have been defaced, really, and I've always considered that a test. I mean, is there something that prevents people from attacking it physically? Maybe that is somehow in the work.
Two very distinguished critics are highly admiring of your work. I'm thinking of reviews that I've read that have been written by John Russell, who says that perhaps time will give a new resonance to your work. Is all the acclaim you've received, he doesn't think it's sufficient. And Robert Hughes, who says that your work has suffered from the prejudice of being successful in two different fields. And as a result, he calls you the most underrated artist in America. Do you think that there has been some prejudice, that here you are, this beautifully garbed man? Is that our notion of an artist? Do we need our artist in a garret? Do we really want him, you know, sequestered and lonely rather than so conspicuous professionally and socially?
Well, I think there's a tradition that society sort of wants the death of the artist. I don't want to be melodramatic, but basically somewhere they feel that value increases if the artist is dead, which is true in many cases. If the values increase even more if he commits suicide, you see. So it goes with this whole image of you have to be miserable, you have to suffer for the art. Then it's like I compared it to a truffle or something like that. It's sort of rare and a bit poisonous
and underground.
And underground, and then somebody comes and discovers it and and it's not true historically. I mean, Rubens was an ambassador, and Whistler was a dandy, a collector. Yes. I mean, if you look at the history of art, and also there's something very provincial that happens in this country. You have to be a painter. You can't be a sculptor if you're a painter. If you're a sculptor, you can't paint. You can't be nonsense. Look at Picasso. Look at Matisse. There were sculptors.
Let's look at Lieberman for a moment. You're spending a great deal of time doing graphic work now. Where do you do that?
In Rome. Now in Rome. I used to do it in Paris. In Rome is a wonderful studio near the Campidoglio, 2RC. And I think graphics are a marvelous source of discovery and enrichment of techniques.
And that is how I would describe your visit with us today. A very special thanks for joining us, Alexander Lieberman, painter, sculptor, artist, editor, who has a show at the Storm King Center from May 18th through August 29th. And thank you, audience, for being with us too. I'm Barbara Lee Diamondstein with About the Arts.